Matt Walsh is a right-winger in media, and so you're not gonna be surprised to find out that he neither understands nor acknowledges climate change. That's pretty stock at this point. But he goes way beyond that in his ignorance and his misinformation. Take a look at what he decided to tweet recently. Remember when they spent years telling us to panic over the hole in the ozone layer and then suddenly just stopped talking about it and nobody ever mentioned the ozone layer again? That's not it though. This was also back during the time when they scared school children into believing that acid rain was a real and urgent threat. Now look, is it possible that we live in a world where Matt Walsh is genuinely dumb enough to not have any idea about how stupid those tweets are? I will acknowledge that we might live in that world. He seems pretty enthusiastically ignorant. I think a more likely explanation though is that he really thinks his fans are ignorant and he likes it and wants them to stay that way. And so he is being paid by millionaires and billionaires to openly lie by cosplaying Comic-Con style as the dumbest man to ever live. He might be the dumbest man to ever live, but I'm going to extend him the credit. I'm going to do an olive branch and assume that he's just grifting that he's this stupid. Now we're gonna break down scientifically why those tweets might be the dumbest things ever posted on Twitter. But Rayyvana, I know I think that you've commented on Matt Walsh a time or two as well. What do you think about these?
Yeah, I think that Matt Walsh somehow manages to maintain the title of creepiest person at Daily Wire, and his competition is pretty stiff. I mean, you've got Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles, who looks like if a magician was also a sex predator, and still somehow, Matt Walsh is taking the cake. I'm sorry, he's the way that he has engaged with trans people online is, and through his documentary, one of the most disgusting things I've seen promoted recently. And he also loves to promote his disgusting transphobic movie documentary on our videos. On all of our videos, which is just showing how much money they have to throw away because you're literally targeting an audience that will never watch your movie instead of spending your money, allocating your resources to promoting your movie to transphobes who will watch it. But I digress. Disgusting. He sucks.
Yeah, and again, maybe he actually hates the trans community as much as he would imply. Maybe he is actually as ignorant about womanhood as he would have you believe. But more likely, no, he knows. He is on TV. He's been given a career by millionaires to protect their economic supremacy. And it's a really convenient thing to distract right wingers from the fact that their economic lives are in absolute shambles by getting them to hate some trans second grade teacher who lives 1,500 miles away. He is an active part of that. He is duping you. If you're a conservative, he's duping you. Now, I know it's hard to admit that you've been duped, but understand that there are communities who will help you if you can come to that realization. It's actually far sadder to just continue to be duped by a rich person who thinks you're a moron. But he is a moron, and we're gonna explain why. Now, he would have you believe that the only people who cared back in the 70s into the 80s about the ozone layer are those damn woke hippies. You know who really wanted to protect the ozone layer? Ronald Reagan, wokester supreme. And how did this actually work? What does the example of dealing with the hole in the ozone layer actually prove? Now, he would imply it's like climate change. It's something they talked about, and then there was never anything to it. Let's talk about real facts. In 1974, there were some scientists. Actually, oddly enough, I got to sit at a dinner table once at an environmental conference with Mario Molina. But anyway, published a paper theorizing that CFCs could destroy, so this is, they're used in a bunch of different things, refrigeration systems, cleaners, a lot of stuff, could destroy ozone in Earth's atmosphere. Until then, they were thought to be harmless, like everything that industries pump into our planets and our bodies until we finally reveal that they are in fact bad. Their findings were attacked by industry who insisted their products were safe in the same way that the fossil fuel industries pretended that climate change didn't exist. Now, the use of CFCs continued unabated, and by the 1970s, they were ubiquitous across the globe. They were used as coolants in refrigerators and air conditioners and aerosol spray cans and as industrial cleaning agents. 1 decade later, the British Antarctic Survey confirmed a hole in the ozone layer based on the prior theorizing and suggested a link to CFCs. So you have an actual problem that is being caused by something industry is producing. Industry is lying about it, attacking scientists who reveal things about it. Scientists continue to do the work in trying to get people to understand what needs to be done. Then in 1987, remember the whole Ronald Reagan thing in 1987? The Montreal Protocol was adopted to protect the ozone layer by phasing out the chemicals which deplete it. And during the next 15 or so years, the production and consumption of CFCs was brought to a halt. By 2009, 98% of the chemicals agreed to in the treaty had been phased out. So what do you have? Industry does a bad thing, scientists identify it, they educate us about it. In this case, the governments, all of them, every single country signed on to that treaty, by the way, decided to phase out the thing that was doing the damage. And you can see a chart here how fast they were able to do it. It turns out you can change a lot when the law gets involved. And so what happened? They solved the actual problem. According to some models, the Montreal Protocol and its amendments have helped prevent up to 2 million cases of skin cancer every year and avoided millions of cataract cases worldwide. And so we identified it, the government acted, and we stopped that bad thing. He would have you believe, hey, remember those dumb hippies who talked about this? No, anyway, climate change is fake. The acid rain thing isn't quite as clear cut, but only because there wasn't as much international cooperation. The acid rain problems that were identified in Europe and North America have largely abated, again, because of government regulations on things like sulfur dioxide, as well as the combination of nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide. We have emission controls. They were put in place by things like the US Clean Air Act of 1970. There was a Canada-US treaty about this and similar measures in Europe as well. Now, we don't talk about it much anymore because we're no longer struggling with it. There are parts of the world that are still dealing with acidification, which is commonly referred to by the term acid rain. Rapidly industrializing countries in some parts of the world don't have those regulations on those things, and they are still experiencing problems with acid rain. And so all of these examples are perfect examples of what he doesn't want you to believe is possible when it comes to other sorts of pollutants, especially carbon.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that Matt Walsh's behavior and his tweets are really emblematic of someone who is suffering from lead poisoning from inhaling lead in the ambient air. Another problem that was solved by the EPA because of regulations on lead in gas. The reason that your gas says unleaded now is because the EPA took action to ban the amount of lead that could be legally in the ambient air. Lead, there's no safe amount of lead for the human body. It can cause developmental delays and difficulty with cognitive processes, which I don't know, Matt Walsh, based on your denial of these basic facts, it seems like you might be struggling with that.
100%, yeah. No, that's another great example. I mean, people were throwing out others in replies to him, like, oh, like they don't talk about the Dust Bowl anymore. Yes, because government policies were put in place to try to deal with it. This is how it's supposed to work. We have scientists to identify things like this. We have government to protect us from these bad things, especially from industry. Honestly, Ray, I find it shocking that what we just described happened. I find it shocking that people paid attention to the scientists when it came to CFCs. The government actually acted, even though it must have cost industry money to change out those substances for other things. And we solved the problem, and every country got involved in it. It is madness to me that that was possible. We can't do literally anything. We can't subsidize EVs, let alone decarbonize the entire US economy. Like, these are perfect examples of what is possible when you look like, let's keep it real, when the media wasn't dominated by right-wing grifting a-holes like Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson. Like, you didn't have nearly as much of that back during this period. Do you think that Ronald Reagan would have done this if he had been listening to Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham every night? Like, it's inconceivable. Anyway, there's one more tweet I want to point out. He says, because he loves being sarcastic. Let's get rid of fossil fuel dependence by switching over to vehicles that run on electricity that is generated by fossil fuels. This is a brilliant plan, and I can't see anything wrong with it at all. Well, you will tend to not see anything wrong with the case you're actually making if you never stop to think about it. And of course, he doesn't care. He might understand the problems with that tweet. So here's the amazing thing about EVs. Yes, in some areas, the electricity that powers them is still generated by fossil fuels. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no difference. It can be better to not have those emissions happening in densely populated urban areas. You can generate the power in other areas, which helps with certain types of pollution. But even so, the EVs have the capacity to, as we clean up our energy grid, have a larger and larger and eventually 100% share of the energy that they're consuming come from renewable energy. That is not possible in internal combustion engine cars, which he wants you to drive. It's a very simple to understand argument, simple enough that even he should be able to work it out. But of course, he's not here for it. He's here to protect oil companies. He's here to protect coal companies. That's why he gets paid. Any other thoughts, Ray?
No, just that Matt Walsh sucks.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.